Hello everyone, hope you are having a good day. This video is episode 3 in the AR family tree series we've been doing here on this channel. If you haven't seen them already, especially the most recent one, I really recommend you do because it's actually relevant to this video. The first episode looked at the Armalite rifles that were developed by the original company Armalite, mostly focusing on the AR-10, AR-18, and of course AR-15 rifles. Episode 2, really go watch that one especially, covers the development of the AR-15 under Colt and its adaptation by the US military as the M16, namely the A1, A2, and A4 variants. In this episode, we are going to be looking at the AR-15 carbines that were developed by Colt, mostly for the use by the US military. So remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's just get into it, and thank you for watching. If we take a quick look at the number of Colt carbines made as well as the time span they were made in, we'll notice pretty quickly that there are a lot more carbines than full-length rifles, and they were more varied for a longer time. As far as I can tell, this is for two main reasons. The first is just how carbines were issued and who issued them. Carbines, being smaller, were primarily favored by vehicle crews and more notably special forces. These groups are of course smaller than the full-on branches of the military, and as such weapons that they use could be ordered in smaller numbers and with less bureaucracy, making the whole process of procuring carbines cheaper and faster. This, in addition to the fact that special forces groups often wanted the most cutting-edge tech and were more dynamic than conventional forces, explains why the US would want so many different types of carbines, even if they were produced in small numbers. The other reason has to do with the mechanics of the gun itself. A carbine has to fulfill three main requirements. It has to be compact, it has to be effective as a rifle, and it has to be reliable. Of course, the first of these requirements comes at the expense of the other two. When shortening a rifle, the barrel has to be shortened since nothing else on the gun but the stock can be made shorter. A shorter barrel, of course, results in lower bullet velocity, which translates to reduced power, accuracy, and range. Given the ballistics of the 5.56 round that the AR-15 fires, the barrel can only shrink to about 10 inches or so before serious performance issues start to pop up. Then there's the issue of the gas system, which of course has to divert enough gas backwards from the barrel to cycle the gun. The shorter the gas system, the shorter the gas tube, which means said gas has less time to burn, thus increasing recoil and parts wear. Plus, since the barrel is shorter, the issue of dwell time comes up. Dwell time is pretty much the amount of time from when the bullet passes the gas port to when it exits the barrel. It is during this dwell time that gas can run through the gas line, since before this the gas hasn't reached the port, and afterward all the gas just comes out of the muzzle, path of least resistance and all that. Too short a dwell time and the gun won't cycle, and as such carbines struggled with reliability in their early development. This was often remedied by widening the gas port to allow more gas in that short time, but once again the issue of recoil and parts wear can start to come up. So that's a quick overview of why there may have been so many different carbines produced. The first Colt carbine was the Colt 605. I go over the naming conventions and numbers, all that, in the last video, so again, please just go watch that unless you're already familiar with the Colt number variations. This was never officially issued, but it was used for a limited degree in Vietnam. The 605 is modeled off of the early 604 rifles and has partial fencing and a 3-prong flash hider. The barrel was hardly a carbine by modern standards, a whopping 15 inches in the barrel, which makes sense if you remembered that this was the first attempt at experimenting with this carbine concept on the AR platform. Otherwise, it was pretty much the same as the Model 604, which we covered in the last video. So this means a carrying handle, fixed stock 20-round magazines, and no forward assist. It did not, however, have a bayonet lug, so that's another difference. However, this gun was quite unreliable even with its long barrel, so it was hardly used. There was two variations of this gun, the 605A, which did have a forward assist and made it more like an early 603, and the 605B, which had a 4-position safety and included 3-round burst and no assist. Next, we have the 607, which was much more like a traditional carbine and still an early 604 at heart. The barrel was 10 inches long, but it had a 3.5-inch moderator to help with dwell time. This moderator was also said to have changed the report of the rifle to sound similar to an AK-47, which would confuse enemy troops. The handguard was of course shortened. The stock was similar in shape, but it was now telescoping and had 2 positions. This rifle had the same variant tree as the 605, with an A version with a forward assist and a B with a 4-position safety and no forward assist. The 608 came next and was similar to the 607, but the stock was a fixed carbine style. The pistol grip was also shortened, oddly enough. All of these carbines, however, were largely experimental, and while they saw service, it was very limited. The first successful carbine that was officially adopted by the US was the Colt 609, dubbed the XM117E1 by the Army. This was based off of the 603 rifles and had both partial and full fencing. It brought back the 2-position stock of the 607, albeit in a carbine style like the 608, as well as the 10-inch barrel, but the moderator was increased to 4.5 inches. The handguard was also circular, a design that wouldn't be picked up by the M16 until 1980. The 610 was largely similar, but had partial fencing and no forward assist. This was also adopted a bit by the Army and dubbed the XM117, but it was also used by the Air Force and was dubbed the GAU-5-A because simplicity is stupid. The 610B was similar, but had a 4-position safety with a 3-round burst and full auto. Now you may be thinking, isn't that a CAR-15? And the answer is yes. As a matter of fact, most all of the rifles we'll be looking at today are CAR-15s. Like the term AR-15, CAR-15, which stands for Colt or Carbine AR-15, is an umbrella term. Generally speaking, this refers to carbine AR-15s developed before the M4. So the XM117, 605, and other rifles that we'll look at later like the XM4 or Colt 723 would all be considered CAR-15s. Later, these rifles were upgraded slightly. The 629 was an upgrade of the 609 and had a slightly longer 11.5-inch barrel, full fencing, and a ring for grenade launchers. This was designated the XM117E2. The 630 was virtually identical, but it was an upgraded 610, so a 11.5-inch barrel, no forward assist, and full fencing. This was called the GAU-5A-A by the Air Force. Again, why be simple when you can be complicated? Sometimes it's thought that the GAU-5A-A was actually the Colt 649, which was identical to the 630, but this may have actually been an export clone version, although some people say that's reversed, but I doubt it given the numbering conventions. Then again, they also named it the GAU-5A-A, so who knows. Next is a little detour of the group which I debated about even including, and that's the 633 run of guns. These were 9mm carbines with 7-inch barrels, a straight front sight since it was too short for the triangle, and no flash hider. The barrel had a 1-in-10 twist and a case deflector, which was not present on previous rifles, and it had no forward assist. Even more odd, the 633 HB had a hydraulic buffer system. The 634 was a slight upgrade, but it had a 10.5-inch barrel, a forward assist, and a birdcage flash hider. The 635 was the same, but no forward assist. The fixed stock design returned with the Colt 651, which was actually an export rifle, but was used by the American Spec Ops. It was like a late 603, but had a shorter circular hand grip and a 14.5-inch barrel. The Colt 652 was with no forward assist, and the 653 did have one, but also had a 2-position buttstock, making this the first rifle similar to the M4. The 654 was just like this, but with no forward assist. Here's where things start to get complicated again, and these are really the ancestor rifles to the M4 and were produced in the 80s and 90s and patterned off of the A2 style rifles. First is the Colt 720, which was actually commissioned as an SMG and sometimes dubbed the XM4. It developed a bit over time, but it had the barrel that would go on to be on the M4, a 14.5-inch government profile with a slight change in the notching to allow for mounting an M203 underbarrel grenade launcher. This rifle utilized a 3-round burst like the M16A2 and may have had a 4-position collapsing stock, either of aluminum or plastic. Otherwise, this was like the A2 rifle, a fixed carrying handle, A2 grip and comp, round handguard. Then we have the Colt 723, which is relatively famous as it was used by Larry Vickers and other Delta Force operators in Desert Storm and Operation Just Cause. He has a video with Forgotten Weapons about this gun and how he ran it, so go check that out if you want more details. This gun was actually an export model for the UAE and was modeled off of the Colt 702 and 03 exports. Pretty much, it was an A2 with the aforementioned changes of the XM4, but had an A1 style pencil profile barrel, A1 rear sights, and full auto capacity. The 727 was another A2 14.5 carbine with full auto, and was slightly different from the 720 in that its barrel shape was a modified A2 barrel for grenade launchers rather than a specially made M4 style barrel. It also has a 4-position plastic stock. The Colt 727 and 720 are some of the carbines that were used in the Black Hawk Down operation, which was in the early 90s, if you were curious exactly what part of history we're in. Then we have the Colt 733, which is similar to these guns but boasts an 11.5-inch barrel as well as an A1 rear sight. The 735 was the same but had a 3-round burst function like the A2. Also, a 733A may have existed, which was identical to this. Sources are confusing. Again, things get pretty complex. The 738, also in this series, had a 4-position safety, but was the same otherwise. Next, we have a return to the XM4 series with the 777, which is pretty much identical to the 727, but just fully standardized in the specific dimensions of the barrel. The 729 was identical to the 720, but had a 3-round burst and the same standardized barrel as the 777. Finally, we get into the most modern leg of the carbines, the 900 series. These guns were based off of the A4 style of guns with detachable carrying handles and flat top Picatinny rails. The official M4 as we know it was made in 1994, produced as the Colt 920. Other than the rail and the handle, this was the same as the 779 and used 3-round burst. The 921, however, was just this but full auto and was designated the M4A1, which is the rifle used by the US Army today. The 921 also had a HB variant with a heavy barrel. The 927, which Wikipedia calls the government carbine, may have been identical to this. We also have the M4 Commando run of guns with 11.5-inch barrels, starting with the 933 with full auto function. The 935 was like this but with 3-round bursts. The 978 was called the M4 Enhanced and had a 4-position safety and a 14.5-inch barrel. And finally, the last rifles we'll look at today are the Colt 991 and 992. These are 9mm variants with 1 in 10 twists, 10.5-inch barrels. The 9.1 is full auto, while the 9.2 is 3-round burst. But that's not fully it. While these are all the models, there's a couple twists to these, namely the Colt 921 M4A1 carbine. The M4A1 had a 14.5-inch barrel, which is great since it balances range with mobility. However, the global war on terror, which was spearheaded by special forces groups, created a need for rifles that were more adept at CQC urban combat, as well as being easily maneuverable with a suppressor added. That being said, these considerations had started a bit before 2001. The 14.5-inch barrel was too long and as such but technically one, solutions was created. Again, this is very complicated, and often two guns that are identical are technically different because of how they were commissioned or built, even if all the parts are the same. So the first of these two, technically one guns, is the CQBR, which stands for Close Quarters Battle Receiver. That's because it wasn't a full rifle, but rather just an upper with a 10.3-inch barrel and a larger gas port. Otherwise, it was the same as the M4A1 with a Knight's Armament quad rail, front sight post, and flat top receiver. This came in a few different types, which were just related to how the gun was ordered, with Type 1, 2, 2A, 3, and 3A, but they were functionally all the same. Both Colt and the NSWC Crane military group supplied these to the US, with Colt supplying the 3 and 3A types, both naked and with accessories, while Crane did the same with 2 and 2A, but over time the CQBR started to get supplied as its own full gun, dubbed the Mark 18. Once again, the types referred to who supplied it, with NSWC supplying the Type 1s and Colt the Type 2s. Then the Mark 18 program standardized and the mods started. Mod 0 was actually made by the NSWC but used A1 lowers, so these are the only guns so far that are functionally different since they don't have a finger ridge on the pistol grip, which is a massive difference, I know, but otherwise totally identical. Then we have the Mark 18 Mod 1, which is what was used for much of the GWAT. The only difference here is that it went back to an M2 style grip, and more importantly, the front of the gun was changed with a full-length Daniel Defense RIS-2 rail, replacing the Knight's Armament version, and the front sight post being removed. At the same time, there was the SOP mod program going on, which sought to upgrade the M4A1s supplied to the US Army Special Forces units. These upgrades, called blocks, mostly dealt with accessories like sights, lasers, and suppressors, so we won't get too deep into those. Block 1 was the same as before in terms of fixed components on the gun, and the same as the Mark 18 Mod 0, but with the 14.5-inch barrel. Block 2 introduced the extended Daniel Defense rail, but allowed for the front sight post to remain. The most cutting-edge AR-15 system used by the US Special Forces now is the URGI, Upper Receiver Group Improved, system by Geisley. This was for both the Mark 18 and M4s, and acts as a de facto Block 3 for the latter, and a new generation of the CQBR or Mod 2 for the former. This really just does away with any front sight posts and uses a heavy M-lock rail instead of the quad style of Knight's Armament or Daniel Defense rails. All in all, we can see that the development of the carbine was far more varied and wacky than the M16s. While the M16 tree had 18 rifles, with the plurality being made in the 60s and then a big jump of exports in the 80s, there are 43 carbines, at least the way I count it, while the early days still see the most change, about half of the models being there. There is still significant development through the 80s and 90s, even into the 2000s. Changes in barrels, stocks, and rails are the primary developments we see, as well as versions with or without forward assists, since the Special Forces didn't standardize on the forward assist question the way that the rest of the US military did by the 1980s. We also have approximately 6 subcategories we could group these into: the 600 series of medium and short barrels, 700 series of medium and short barrels, and 900 series of medium and short barrels, the first two of which can be broken down between having a forward assist and not having a forward assist, plus our 9mm variants, which sort of count. So that's it for this video, everyone. I know this one was a lot more convoluted. Hope you enjoyed. Next video in the series is going to be about foreign variants, so stick around for that one. I also have a bunch of the sources I used in the description, so if you just want to do your own research, go ahead and look at those. Anyways, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.